She's purring.
You could hear her purring.
She's so loud.
She is so loud. She's happy. Hi guys! So welcome back to my little channel here. As promised, we are finally sitting down to do the continued adoption Q&A session. And so this is part 2.
Jackrabbit. Sorry. All three of them, look, there's 3 of them running.
What?
On the back.
I don't see it.
Look at them. No, on the right side of the playset. There's 3 of them chasing each other.
How
It's
come I
so
don't
stinking
see
fun.
them?
Today we are filming, it is, what's today's date? Saturday, July 25th. And we just celebrated 6 months we've had Ezra. So let's go ahead into the Q&A. How is Ezra coping?
Great. I think he's coping great. There's not a lot to update because there's a lot of the same. He's sleeping the same. He's interacting with his brother and sister the same.
But he's eating normal now.
Yeah.
He's not gorging himself. So that is a
this is good.
celebration. It really is. He's comfortable and he's just doing awesome. We just had our 6 months home study. He's doing phenomenal. He's sleeping through the night still. It's been a very, very smooth transition, and I know that this is not everybody's case. So this is like the best case out there. According to our social worker, this is what we've prayed for. This is what a lot of people have prayed for, and we are very, very thankful that God has given us just such a smooth transition during this time, especially with the whole pandemic and everything. So Ezra is doing wonderful. He can fully understand English now, and he is very, very interested in just words and trying to talk. He loves music still. He's a dancer and a singer. He'll try to sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
He sings it very well.
Yes.
He does.
You can't understand the words, but you know the tune. So he is
You don't
very
have to understand the
musical.
words.
Yes.
Normal is really going to be different for everybody, I think.
Right.
So I don't really think that there's a normal. This is how he is with us, which is great. Like King said, we're super, super, super thankful. But every child is different. And it's not like the child isn't normal. It's just he or she is different.
Is there a special reason for adopting a Korean boy? Anyway, Ezra is so cute.
We agree. He's very cute.
He is the cutest, in my opinion. But I am biased because I'm his mama. So, anyway, is there a special reason for adopting a Korean boy?
I'd say kind of what we said in a previous video. I think when we were feeling led to adopt, we first pursued everything locally, like through the state of Texas and everything. Kept praying about it, and then it just kind of like hit us, hey, I was adopted. And
From Korea.
But through an organization called Dylan. So then we decided to pursue adoption through Dylan. And then when doing that, we weren't necessarily feeling tied to a specific country necessarily, because they have adoptions from Korea and Vietnam and China and places like that. But when we were looking to, for what we qualify for, South Korea was the only country that we qualify for. So,
and it was like the only thing that didn't qualify us for the other countries were like our children in the home were a lot younger, and let's see, what was it? Oh, we weren't old enough at that point. But I think
she wasn't old enough.
They've lifted some of those restrictions. Like you had to be 30 years old, and I was not quite there yet.
She's
so
still not there yet.
I will be there soon. But yes.
And it's just awesome that he's from South Korea and
I know,
I'm from South Korea. So that is really, really cool.
How cool of a picture it is. Like, yes. What was the first reaction of your kids when you talked about the adoption? I think Eli was a little too young to understand whenever we first brought it up. But Edith was excited, but also like a little confused, I would say.
They didn't really understand the term adoption, but whenever you just talked about getting a brother or sister, they were excited more about that.
Yeah.
Than,
and then I feel like it's kind of cool because they can kind of piece it together a little easier, especially with Edith, because Paul and Peter, your brother and Peter.
Your brother and you.
Your brother and you were both adopted, and every year they celebrate their arrival day, which is not arrival day anymore because we have to go get our child. So it's kind of like gotcha day or family day, whatever you want to
Delivery
call
day.
it.
I don't even know.
So yeah, we celebrate it every year with Peter and his brother. So I feel like the kids were already kind of introduced to adoption and they already knew that their dad was adopted. So it's not anything new under the sun.
Yeah, comprehending what adoption is, I guess. It's still a little foreign, but it makes sense. You know, they're 6 and 3, so.
Yeah. And they weren't even 6 and 3 whenever we introduced
yeah,
it, because
that's
it took, Edith was barely
5 and
5.
2.
Yeah. Were you able to choose the nationality of your child?
So you kind of can,
You do.
if you qualify for whatever country it is, because every country has different qualifications. So in our particular case,
No.
no, because all we qualified for was South Korea, which is great. We're super thankful. But, you know, if you qualify for other countries, then yeah, you can choose from which country you'd like to adopt from. And every organization is different too, so they have different qualifications, things like
This
that.
was just through our own organization. They have their own requirements and guidelines and all that stuff. How do you communicate with Ezra?
With our words and our body language.
Yes, I would say at first we did try to learn some Korean, learn as in like toddler words. Like our agency gave us this little booklet of Korean words that you can, it's like a dictionary basically. Or is it a dictionary? No.
Not necessarily a dictionary.
it
It's more
called?
like a booklet with
Translating booklet. Where it's like, it has the English words like for breakfast and lunch and dinner.
common phrases.
Yeah, common phrases that they would understand, and they have the pronunciation in Korean, so then we can use that.
Having children already, you kind of, like, it's not your first rodeo necessarily, so.
They learn so quickly. Like Ezra has just blown us away with the amount of retention he has in English and just his comprehension. It is mind-blowing to me
Yeah,
still.
he's a brilliant child.
Yes.
He really does. So if he doesn't necessarily understand the words specifically, he understands what you communicate because of body language and direction and expression and things like that. I mean, he knows everything.
Do you still communicate with the people who took care of Ezra before you? So I think you're referring to the foster family.
So we can't.
At this point, we cannot be in contact with them because the adoption is technically, it's not finalized yet. I think our agency said that after the 1 year, like after the 1 year home study, whenever everything is finalized and all the documents are turned in to whichever organization needs them, then we can reach out and get their contact information and keep in touch with them. But as of right now, we are not communicating really any at all. What have you been doing to help Ezra bond and attach to you? Much love.
So we cocooned when we came back to the States in January, and that was significantly helpful. It was just us as a family unit, which was great, and that was one of the main things. And really just involving him in our everyday rituals is what people call it, rituals and routines and things like that. So he really does feel like he belongs. We have pictures of him all over the place, and you know, just involving him with everything that we do. And then granted with the pandemic and everything, which is horrible, but we've had extended cocooning time because of it.
Yeah, which is really a blessing.
Yeah.
Because he really did need longer than those 6 weeks or whatever that we were cocooning. So we are very thankful for that, and he has just blossomed and has done tremendously.
And now we're all butterflies.
Amazing. We are. He's a little butterfly. How did you decide to bring your other child or children to Korea?
Well, so we knew we were going to have to go twice. We have to go once for court and paperwork, and then we'd come back to the States, and then we had to go back to pick Ezra up and come back to the States.
I mean, we had a few pretty good reasons why we would like for them to go. I think it's like for culture exposure, and that Peter was going back to his home country for the first time ever since he's been adopted. And so it was really like a special time, and we really wanted to enjoy it with your family. And your mom and dad hasn't been to Korea since they've adopted you. So it was just a really cool thing that we got to do, and not a lot of families get to do that. So
Yeah. So we wanted to make sure that we brought them
Mm-hmm.
at least once. And yeah.
yes, but really for each family, like if you take your children or not, I think it just depends on what your preference is
Yeah.
and
Depends on
what
a lot of
works
different
best for your
things.
family, like how old your children are, things like that. So there's many factors, and each family is going to do whatever is best for their family. But
'Cause
those were some of our deciding factors.
Yes. And my parents were super, super helpful with the kiddos whenever we went. So it made it a lot more possible.
Can you talk about the days and weeks after you brought your child home, the grief? I will link a video down below because I felt like we really covered it pretty well in like the post-adoption 2-week update, 1-month update, and 3-month update. So those were really the hardest months for us, grief-wise.
But if you have follow-up questions on that,
Yes.
feel welcome to ask us.
Yes. How did you prepare your family for adoption? Favorite books?
Well, we definitely had some training through the organization and books to read and things like that. It was really a lot of prayer and talking things through with both King and I, and then with our kiddos. But kind of like what we said before, our kiddos don't necessarily understand 100% what adoption is, but it's just been a part of our family culture for a long time. Reading materials that we had that were recommended by our organization were actually really, really helpful, because there's just a lot of things that we think that we know, and in some ways we do, but hearing things from a different perspective or from a different viewpoint is just really, really, really eye-opening. So we think that we know it all sometimes, but even if you do, there's a lot of really, really good material out there to kind of refresh yourself on and get a different spin on things. And yeah.
So that's a lot of the preparing me and Peter did for
Yeah.
us. But as for like Edith and Eli, how did we prepare them? We would get monthly updates of Ezra, and we would show those pictures, and every night before we go to sleep we would pray for Ezra and just his foster family. And that's really an easy way to keep Ezra a part of our family even though he isn't here. It was very intentional that we discussed Ezra as often as possible, and we had pictures of him all over our house for the kids to look at, and they were free to discuss like if they had any negative feelings or if they were sad or happy or excited about the adoption. So we tried to make it very easy for them to talk about it. Is adoption expensive? The short and clear answer is yes. International adoptions specifically.
Well, domestic adoptions too.
Private domestic adoptions are expensive, but if you're going through the foster care system, fostering to adopt, it is free.
It's different.
I did a finance video regarding adoption and with all of our fundraisers and stuff, so I will link that down below also. Do you want to adopt again in the future? Ooh, do we?
The short answer would be yes.
But as to when,
We don't really know.
we don't really know. I feel like this is all just so fresh still, and I feel like we need some time to adjust. And if there is a point in the future where we are feeling like this is the time to adopt, we are absolutely 100% for it. So, yes.
Yes. How are you?
How am I?
How are you?
How am I? I am doing great. Thank you for asking. In the grand scheme of things, I'm doing pretty good. I wasn't the past month just because of everything that was going on, but I did a video on that also. So I will link that one down
There you
below
go.
as to some of these struggles since COVID and all the riots and all of the adoption drama stuff. So that video is down below also.
And right here, I'll put it in the iCard. I think it's usually on this side. Somewhere in these two corners.
You have the cutest kids ever. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. We also think so, but like I said
We're
before,
biased.
we are very biased because, I mean, we're their parents. Do you ever worry that Ezra will feel bad that he's adopted?
I think the short answer would be we're not necessarily worried. We're more like preparing for potential inquiries that he has or feelings, different feelings that he has down the road. Sure, you know, kind of like what we said before and what my brother and I grew up with. Adoption impacts children differently. They have different mindsets on it. Some children, it's nothing but great things. For other children, it's extremely, extremely difficult. So really just praying over that and trying to prepare ourselves the best as possible for whatever comes down the road. We don't know all the answers, and we don't know what he's going to do, but we're open for whatever. We're going to support Ezra in whatever way, shape, or form. And
Yeah, well, I think as of right now, what we can do right now is to be proactive in talking to other adoptive families. And obviously Peter is adopted, so I feel like we already have a little more than like other families who this is maybe the first adoption they've experienced personally. And so, yeah, being proactive and also just being willing to listen to your children. I think that is the most important.
I think one of the cool things where we're coming from that, you know, some families have, some families don't, is just the fact that we can empathize with him at just a completely different level than others, just because of family history and where we're from, how it happened, and our age, and we have that history, and my brother has that history, and I think that's going to be largely beneficial, you know, if he has questions or concerns. But I don't know if worry is the term. I'm sure down the road worry will probably come to fruition, but for the time being, we're just trying to love this little guy and the best that we can, just like the other two. And
I think we're embracing the journey today. I feel like worrying about the future too much is not going to do anybody any good. So we do think ahead about it, but I think we're choosing to trust the Lord in what he has given us today. As of right now, Ezra is doing amazing. So praise God for that. For other families who are going through adoption, there are many fears and many worries. I feel like as you're waiting, and this particular family, one of their biggest fears is around finances and future regret and dynamics with their 2 biological kids. How do you go about adoption whenever your fears are around finances and just fear of the unknowns that are coming with adoption? Because it will be a challenging road. It's not going to be easy. And then also with families reacting to your adoptions because they may or may not accept it. So fears of the unknown of adoption.
So I don't know, I guess I'll give the typical guy response, but for that last part, I don't think it really matters what anybody else says. I think that adoption is between you, your family, and the Lord, and it doesn't really matter what other people think. Now, granted, that is easier to say, especially if, you know, you have hostile family or close friends or something like that, but
or if they're very adamantly against it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be hard.
It's hard. We didn't really have any hostility or strong feelings against our adoption, so I can't necessarily speak to that. But like I said, between you, your family, and the Lord, I would say too that in some ways adoption is for everybody. You know, like the Bible does talk about Christians adopting and as far.
And also don't let fear of man keep you from adopting. I think
really
at the end of the
difficult.
day, if you love the Lord, you should check it with the truth of the gospel and align it with what does God want you to do? Because ultimately, who are you trying to please, God or man? You know, and if you guys are feeling strongly led to adopt, then fervently pray and seek the Lord for guidance in that. But I don't know. I've had like subtle just comments from people like, oh, like, why would you want to adopt? Like, I don't get it. And my mom was kind of confused. She wasn't adamantly against it, but she was like, it didn't make sense to her. It's not a common thing in Asian culture to adopt, I feel like. So there were some road bumps, but I think it's a beautiful time to share the love of Christ with those around you. Like the reason why you would want to adopt, if you're a believer and that is the reason why you want to adopt, or really you get to share a part of your heart with them. So it opens doors for hard conversations.
But good conversations. But finances do come into play too, because we do need to be good stewards, and it really just depends, because if you're neglecting some areas of financial necessity in your life in order to, you know, address adoption or put money towards adoption, I don't know, it might not be like the wisest decision. I'd probably reach out to some folks that you trust and can put ideas past to them. Just always seek input from, you know, your brothers and sisters, and just that'll be affirmation to move forward, or maybe they'll have some words of caution and that sort of thing. So I can't necessarily speak specifically into your situation, but I always say that there are definitely times when, by all means, go for adopting. Yes, it will be financially difficult, but then there are other scenarios too where it might be unwise, at least at this point in time. And in both cases, just I would reach out to, you know, brothers and sisters, and just pick their brains and have them pray over you, and seek guidance from them. I think is really, really, really beneficial.
I also want to throw in, I feel like for adoption, we should not go into this adoption already having the mindset that this child that you're going to adopt is an outsider. You know, like, oh, are they going to get along well with my other kids? Because even if you deliver a child, you gave birth to a third child, I mean, there's no guarantee that that little child is gonna, like, your two other kids are going to be handling that child different than if it was an adopted one.
I would say that the emphasis is really just the child is your child. You know, he or she isn't going to be any different. Their history might be different than biological children, sure, but at the end of the day, he or she is your child, just like the other two.
And if anything, just for example, like with Ezra, like, we do not view him any differently than our other two children, other than the fact that he's adopted, but that we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on him as our child, and God gave him to us, and we are so blessed and so thankful to have him in our lives. And when you view him or the child as a gift from God, instead of having like the savior mentality almost, you know, we're like, we want to save a child from poverty or whatever it is. I know, like, God has called us to love orphans and widows, but I think along the way it can be a little skewed.
Like having, you know, like, these are my children and this is my adopted child. I don't think I wouldn't support that
Right.
Either necessarily. Like, these are my children.
These are my children, period.
And
It
that's it.
shouldn't be biological or adopted.
Yeah, and regardless, children are going to have, you know, they're going to be kids, and they're going to get in fights and arguments and be mean to one another. They're also going to be loving to one another, and just, I don't know, it's helping them navigate relationships between each other and showing Jesus' love through them. And
Future regret.
I mean, any addition to your family will change the dynamic. I think that would be safe to say.
Yes, like your family dynamics going, like us going from a family of 4 to a family of 5. It is different. It's never going to be the same again. That doesn't mean it's like we're scaring you guys to really not adopt or anything like that, but just reality check.
Yeah, because you get a third car seat. That's painful.
No.
Moving car seats is the worst. Don't have any expectations. You know, when you have a child, your first child and then your second child, they're not the same. Your third child, they're not the same. Don't have any expectations, and go into it with an open mind and a clean slate, and I don't know, maybe expect the worst, but and
But
everything's
also
gonna be
pray for the best, you know?
Yeah,
I
'cause-
feel like you really just cannot have expectations. People have expectations of how things should go. And with adoption, just like with a lot of things in life, like things are not gonna go the way you want, the way you planned. There will be bumps along the road, but that is just a part of life. Like,
and
you
it's,
can't control every aspect of your life.
yeah.
So,
It's a part of sanctification too. Like if we go through life and everything's hunky-dory and rainbows and butterflies, you're not going to grow. The Lord's not going to grow you in that. There's going to be difficulties. There will be. And welcome them and grow through them and pray through them. You'll grow as an individual. You'll grow as a head of household, wife, mother, brother, sister, like, yeah. And I'm sure we're going to have more bumps down the road, and it just it is what it is. But I would say that don't let fear discourage you from adopting. You know, I would say that that's probably from the enemy.
but
Well, I'm tired now.
that's it. It's super long, but we hope that you guys have enjoyed this long overdue Q&A session number 2.
My bad.
And we just really couldn't find the time to sit down for some reason, even though we were kind of quarantining, but not, I don't know. Anyway,
There you go.
thank you guys.
Keep the questions coming.
Yes.
If we weren't clear on something, ask it again. If if anything comes to mind, feel welcome to share it with us.
Yes.
No question is too personal. Like, we'll answer pretty much everything, and we get it. So
Yes, thank you guys for following our journey
Yep,
and for
감사합니다.
asking questions, and thank you
Until
for
next
reaching
time.
out. Yes,
and for being patient.
yes, very patient. Okay, bye.
I don't wanna let you down. It's the only thing I think about every morning. You know my life ain't figured out, but I promise if you stick around it'll never get boring. We'll spend nights, cheap red wine, look at flats even though we can't afford them. I don't wanna let you down.